Hello and welcome to another episode of Archery Releases Ad Nauseum. Today I'm going to dissect the new for 2024 Stan Archery LynX Hinge. This video essay is written and formatted so you can listen to it like a podcast. There will be a few segments worth watching, and I will have timecodes in the description so you can skip to those and observe the visuals if you feel the need to do so. Otherwise, you can just pop in some earbuds and listen to me yammer on for almost 6,000 words while you go about your business. Disclaimer, I bought these releases with my own money. I have no sponsorships or affiliations, I am not provided samples for evaluation, and I belong to no cults that worship one brand forsaking all others. So I have no undisclosed motivations that keep me from pushing the positive and minimizing the negative. I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm unencumbered in my ability to tell you exactly what I think of the product as well as the company and anybody else who markets it. The Stan LynX Hinge came out in late December 2023, and I promptly ordered an aluminum and a heavy metal in large from Lancaster Archery. There weren't any other sizes available, so I figured I'd cover both and make sure that they both fit into my holsters. I placed my order the same day they released their product videos, and it was shipped the day after Christmas. They arrived 2 days after Christmas, so living close to Lancaster Archery does have its advantages, though my bank account may disagree. On the subject of Lancaster Archery, I don't know if this is a new thing or if I've just noticed it because I've just started looking for it, but they seem to have become the heralds of the industry, and they announce new products on YouTube and social media for a number of companies, sometimes doing it before the companies put out their own pressers for them. This probably makes sense for companies like Stan and Trueball when you consider the difference in the size of their social media footprint versus Lancaster's. By the way, the pronunciation Lancaster and Langcaster are both acceptable. I was born and raised in the suburbs of Philadelphia, so you'll hear me throwing the G into the word where no G is present. Stan doesn't put a whole lot into their marketing, it seems, at least the stuff that goes out to the general public. It boils down to their products showing up on the market, announcements on social media, and a video from Lancaster Archery. Trueball clearly has its own marketing and social media team, and they're on the other side of the spectrum, with overproduced videos with epic music and the product sitting in shadows, with mist floating all around it, just waiting to be revealed so it can increase your overall standard of living. I suppose it generates interest, those kind of videos, but to be blunt, it's an archery accessory. It doesn't require the pomp of a professional wrestler walking out to the ring. Regardless of the difference in their marketing budgets, they both use Lancaster to show off their new toys. Why? Because Lancaster has the eye of the entire industry, and not as many people are going to be apt to subscribe to the YouTube channel of a release manufacturer. Now, if you're going to farm out your marketing to a third party, it's important to make sure the information they are pushing about the product is consistent with the product itself. Keep that in mind. I'm not done with it yet. We're going to get back to that later. So I'm going to go over the features of the LynX first, and then I'm going to report on whether the product matches what we were told it was supposed to be. The Stan LynX is supposed to be considered a more budget-friendly hinge option from Stan. Given how the prices for handheld releases have flown off the handle over the last few years, budget-friendly does not mean what it used to. In the interest of keeping the price down, the LynX doesn't have any fancy doodads or brand new gimmicks to revolutionize the industry this year, anyway. It's a hinge, and it does hinge things the Stan way. Ever since they discontinued an entire line of popular releases like the SX3, Shoot-Off, Perfex, Element, and Morex lines, those are behind me right now, and leaned completely into the Onyx, Stan has slowly been introducing less expensive options in various categories of releases. Those include the Axis Thumb Release, Solex Wrist Release, and now the LynX Hinge. I don't think they're going to offer a less expensive resistance release to round off all the categories, but only time will tell and the market will decide. The Stan LynX comes in a white box, and everything you can do with this release comes in the box with it, with one exception. The box contains the release, 3 and 4 finger sweep adjustable attachments with the third finger installed, 2 double-sided moons, a small thumb peg, a large thumb peg, a short thumb peg post, a long thumb peg post, a trainer lock pin, 2 Allen keys, and an aluminum plug piece to close off the handle if you're an absolute unit and choose to remove the thumb peg assembly entirely and use this hinge without a pulling post. It also comes with the instruction manual that they call the technical guide. Another little piece that you can't see that comes with the release is a little metal piece that fits into the hole for the thumb peg locking set screw and presses against the thumb peg post when you tighten down the locking screw. Stan calls that little piece the thumb peg slug. You only get one of them, and you need to swap it between thumb pegs if you go from large to small. It's rounded on one end, and that goes against the thumb peg post to keep it from marring the peg, and it also seems to lock the peg down more solidly than just ramming a set screw straight into the post. The jaw, the hook, the thumb pegs, thumb peg post, thumb peg slug, trainer lock pin, and most of the hardware on the LynX are made of bare stainless steel, with no black coating on it like they did with the Onyx to keep the whole package reflective. The color scheme actually harkens back to the old Stan Morex line, and I definitely don't think that's an accident. The included moons are double-sided, there are 2 of them, and offer a choice of no click, slow click, medium click, and fast click. They are labeled with dots, with no dot being no click, 1 dot being the slow click, 2 dots the medium, and 3 the fast click. It doesn't actually specify in the technical guide which one is which, and you'd think that would be worth mentioning in the literature. It is also not listed in the technical guide the actual measured lengths of the clicks. The Morex line, the fastest click was 6/100ths, and I think the slowest was 14, but those numbers really don't mean anything if you don't have any point of reference. The LynX has a closed index finger design with an oval hole instead of a circle. Supposedly this allows for more clearance for your knuckles if you plan on using it without a thumb peg and need to choke up on the handle. My fingers are not thick enough to be able to tell if this makes any difference. PJ Riley claims a closed index finger has a more secure feel to it, but in my experience it doesn't feel any different at full draw, and the only thing you can do with this versus a hinge with an open index finger is spin it on your finger or snap it to a carabiner if you don't have anywhere else to put it. The LynX Hinge is available in 4 sizes, small, medium, large, and extra large, and no other company handles sizing better than Stan. They do it the hard way with no shortcuts, but you won't get a better opportunity for a fitted feel than with a Stan release. Each size is different by about 10%, and all the proportions of the handles are changed, including the thickness of the handle and the size of the finger attachments. So instead, where some companies do kind of lip service to sizing, they go all the way with it, and they deserve credit for that. The finger attachments on the LynX are the same ones used on the Onyx, and you can install any size finger attachment on any size Onyx or LynX, so there's even more opportunity for customization. Based on the larges I have here, the finger beds are the same size and shape as a large Stan Onyx, so if the sizing of the rest of the LynX models follows Stan's format, the LynX will match the Onyx in shape but not in hook location. Something also worth noting is the handle on the LynX has a very similar size and shape to the Stan Jet Black, which is the 3-finger large model of the Morex. The Jet Black's hook is a little taller and out a little further over the middle finger, depending on how it's set, and it has a thinner neck than the LynX. However, the Jet Black and LynX have an almost identical profile with the LynX's finger attachment swept fully forward. So anybody looking for an updated version of the Morex, I'm fairly certain Stan had you in mind when they designed the LynX. Technically, with the LynX's feature set and sweep adjustable handle, the large can take the place of the Curo, Jet Black, Black Pearl, and Black Pearl DS. So it's four Morexes in one. The main body of the handle of the LynX is not tapered, but then it steps down to a thinner finger attachment that is machined straight but has a tapered finger bed. The finger beds are rounded with a thin flat area on the center and are comfortable to grip. They don't feel overly blocky because it's a hinge, and hinges shouldn't feel blocky at all. The LynX has a thinner neck than the Onyx Hinge. I feel compelled to touch on that because a lot of people mention the thickness of the neck as something they don't like about the Onyx Hinge. They feel it spreads their middle and index finger more than hinges they are accustomed to using. I've heard and read it enough times from enough different sources that it's worth touching on if you may be looking for a hinge from Stan and you don't like the Onyx Hinge for that particular reason. There are other reasons you might not like it either, but I won't touch on those. I have a separate review for that. The LynX is designed to be able to completely remove the thumb peg assembly and use it as a no thumb peg hinge. Stan released pegless hinges in the past, most recently the Onyx and Curo, Onyx with a Y, and Curo of the Morex line. Those are made with no mounting point for a thumb peg at all, so while you can technically just remove the thumb peg on any other hinge and use it in a similar fashion, Stan gives you the option of deleting it off the handle and filling the hole. If you do decide to take a walk on the wild side and use the LynX without a peg, I highly recommend practicing with a trainer pin installed and adjusting the moon so you can draw it flat with even finger pressure. Either that or hire a dentist on retainer. The LynX can be shot as a 2, 3, or 4 finger release. The handle is contoured in a manner that would make it usable as a 2 finger, similarly but not exactly the same to the Onyx. However, just like the Onyx, if you're going to take off the finger attachments and use it as a 2 finger, there is this empty space in the handle with a gap at the tip of the middle finger bed. It's functional that way, but it really needs something in there to close it off and make the release feel complete. Stan had the foresight to make a plug to fill in the hole for the thumb peg assembly, but they don't offer anything to close off the handle. I would argue that plugging the hole for the finger attachment is more useful than the space for the thumb peg assembly, but they haven't seemed to have gotten the memo yet. I do not know how much of a market there is for a real 2-finger hinge. The knock-on releases, by the way, are 2.5 fingers for anyone who just started seeing lime green when I said that. One way or the other, there is enough of a market to motivate manufacturers to start machining their handles like they know somebody would use it as such. They're just not ready to lean into it and finish the job yet. Since the major manufacturers aren't doing it, third-party accessory makers started making and selling 3D printed plugs that fit into this spot and close it off. And the nicest ones I found so far are from a guy who sells on eBay under the screen name PackImp808 with no spaces. Super easy screen name to remember, I know, so I'll link his shop down in the description. Here's what the piece looks like installed on the LynX, and it looks like it was made to be there. The 3 and 4 finger attachments are sweep adjustable and offer a range where the handle can be set almost completely straight or with a moderate sweep. The thumb peg assembly has the same adjustability range as the Stan Onyx series. It has a multi-axis thumb peg and it can be set to a broad range of positions to fit the preferences of the user. This feature is unique to Stan hinges. The majority of hinges on the market have a non-adjustable thumb peg that screws directly into the side of the handle. They may have more than one mounting hole position, and some companies position them more strategically than others, but they don't get any more adjustable than the Stan LynX Onyx and to a lesser extent the old Morex series. The LynX is able to accept a trainer lock pin, which is patented and exclusive to Stan releases except for when a certain East Asian country chooses to ape on the design. The pin is the same shape and thread pitch as the Onyx as well as the older Stan releases that accepted a trainer lock, so the LynX will accept just about any trainer lock pin you have laying around when you invariably misplace the one that was included. They all work, but some of them are longer and can stick out of both sides of the head, so you could have one like an XXL Onyx trainer pin might stick out the other side, but the small might just fit perfectly. The trainer lock pin is inserted into a hole in the side of the head of the LynX, and it keeps the hook from releasing while allowing the user to test the speed of the release without loosing an arrow. I usually set my hinges up on a Saunders firing line trainer first, and then I move to the bow with the trainer lock pin installed. It's never quite right when going from a release trainer to a bow, so I do that to make sure I don't have it set where it's going to release prematurely, because my hinges are all set very hot in a fashion that I wouldn't want to hand it to somebody else. A lot of people draw a lot flatter than I do. The LynX, unlike the Onyx, has a lanyard attachment point in the form of a triangle at the base of the handle. That makes it a little more versatile and would fulfill one of my 2 requirements for being suitable for use while hunting. That said, you have other problems to contend with if you're going to do that. The other criteria is the ability to hook it onto a D-loop, and since it's a hinge, that's out of the question. However, there is a new release in pre-order made by Evolution Outdoors called the Ibex that is a pseudo-hinge with a jaw that can lock onto the D-loop. I'm on the pre-order list for that, and they should be shipping mid-January or early February, which isn't all that far away, and I'm going to report on that when I have one in my possession. There is a hole drilled in the spine of the handle of the LynX to access the locking screw for the moon, so you have to insert an Allen key directly through your lanyard attachment point to get to it, so you may have to untie your lanyard until you get the moon set where you want it. I am glad they added a lanyard attachment point to the LynX because everyone's been screaming about getting one for the Onyx. I'm still waiting on the retrofit lanyard attachment point for the Onyx, and a lot of people are as well. They could very easily just drill a hole in the finger attachments or add a strut to the top of the whale tail to the back of the attachment. Just put a little loop right there. That would solve everyone's grumbling over it, and I don't know what is keeping them from just fucking doing it. The trade-offs for keeping the price down to a more reasonable level, according to PJ and Stan, are the moon on the LynX is not micro-adjustable, and the hook does not have a magnet or spring to act as hook retention. According to Lancaster's video, the LynX has a built-in system to keep the moons from moving when you unlock it, and the hook is designed to resist motion and flopping free once it's reset. The way PJ specifically hit on these points, it's almost as though he knew people were going to wonder why a hinge made in 2023 does not come with these features, because just about the rest of them do. So non-micro-adjustable moons I consider to be a step backwards, considering the Morex line that was discontinued had a micro-adjustable sear. Those releases are still highly sought after, especially the Blackjack, which is a 3-finger medium. So the question you're going to have to ask yourself if you're considering this release is, how often do you change the speed of your release? If you fiddle with them a lot, then a release with a speed adjustment that moves with the turn of a screw might be more appealing. If you set it where you like it and rarely adjust it, then the hassle of moving it with your fingers or poking it with an Allen key during initial setup may bother you less, because once it's set, you're not going to touch it again. That's me in a nutshell. So how much is micro-adjustability worth to you? If you can't live without it, then the LynX is not for you. If you like everything else about it and can tolerate a somewhat antiquated adjustment system, then this might just be the hinge for you. Hook retention is kind of a similar issue. At this point, I consider it a misstep not to include it. Please keep it in mind. I'm not done with that yet. If you're used to not having it and you're fine with a new hinge that doesn't have it, great. If you got spoiled like I am, and you really think it's a good idea to have it, and you would prefer one that does have it, then this might not be the one for you either. The LynX uses a modified half-moon design for its speed adjustment, but it has a system called the clutch that keeps the moon from falling loose when unlocked. It consists of a spring-loaded plug that sits between the locking screw and the moon. It is captured also using the two halves of the handle on both ends, so it doesn't come out when you back the locking screw out or if you take apart the area around the head. So when you unlock the moon after unlocking the locking screw for the lock screw, you press the front or back of the moon to adjust its speed and you rock it on its pivot. It's functional enough, but it's not as easy as turning a screw, and no amount of fine motor control skills will make it as precise as a micro-adjust system. That clutch also has a side effect of making changing or flipping of the moons a little bit trickier. The dowel pin that holds the head and the moon onto the handle is secured by the locking screw for the moon. You unlock the locking screw for the locking screw, back the locking screw out until it almost falls out, then push the dowel pin out either side. To reassemble, you line up the holes in the head, handle, and moon. However, to line up the moon and the dowel pin, you have to press down on the moon to counteract the clutch system that is pushing it back up and out of alignment. It took me a few tries to figure that out, but all subsequent attempts were faster now that I know where to apply pressure. Then you adjust the moon to the speed that you want it. There are no hash marks on the moons for reference, by the way. Those would have been useful. One thing that's a bit out of character for Stan is they left a good amount of extra space between the head and the moon in that little area. So instead of a snug fit with minimal play, there's enough space to shift the moon far out of alignment with the hook when you put everything back together. So you'll need to take extra care to center it so the contact surfaces between the hook and the moon line up squarely. It probably will function fine if you don't, but keeping them lined up should keep the parts from wearing unevenly. It looks like there should be bushings or something in there on both sides of it, or they should have just machined it wider to fill that space. Or, I'm going to throw out a hypothetical. Does anyone think it's possible they left extra room in that spot to be able to insert a second moon in there and serve as an independently adjustable click? They could make the speed moon a little less wide and then fill out the rest of the space with a click moon. It wouldn't be micro-adjustable, but it would satisfy a lot of people's requests for a dual moon hinge from Stan, which a lot of people think is long overdue. I doubt Stan would have assembled it this way with such a sloppy fit unless they were planning on doing more with this platform. I'm going to make a prediction, and I will be affirming my prescience if it ever comes into fruition. The head on the LynX has a mid-range geometry to it, and between that and the huge adjustment range available from the moon system, which actually kind of works out to be an advantage in this case, most archers should be able to set it up in a way that works with your preferred hand angle on the draw and your method of shot execution. This is probably going to end up being clipped as a separate video or posted in a separate video as an excerpt because I think it's something to look for when you're shopping for a hinge. It's also going to depend on where you are in terms of your proficiency and if you have already established the way you like to grip it when you draw the bow. If you're new to hinges and you don't have an established method of grip and shot execution, then I would recommend picking the one you think fits your hand the most comfortably and committing yourself to learning that hinge. I don't believe there is a right or wrong way to grip or release, and I do not believe there is a right or wrong method of shot execution. The right way is the way that works best for the individual, and one person's methods may be vastly different from someone else's. If they're both consistently hitting where they're pointing, then how can one be right and one be wrong? That being said, not every hinge is capable of working for every archer, and I believe the geometry of the head and neck is the determining factor in whether it is capable of being fitted to the archer, or the archer has to adjust his form in order to be able to use it. I place a higher value on pieces of equipment where it is not necessary for me to make adjustments to my form in order to be able to use them effectively. My equipment works for me, I don't work for it. Every hinge on this wall can be set to release the hook with an almost imperceptible amount of movement. Yet a common complaint about certain ones is they feel like they take ages to release their hook no matter how hot they set the sear. Are some hinges naturally slower than others? Yes, they actually are, and I'm going to tell you why. The way to tell how fast a hinge release is capable of being set is by looking at the angle of the head when it's pinned against the top of the neck. This will determine how much rotation is required to get it to start pivoting and traveling along the moon. If you draw the bow with a grip angle that keeps the head pinned against the top of the neck, then the handle needs to rotate enough just to get to the point where the head starts to lift up off the neck, and then it needs to keep moving far enough to travel over the click and off the ledge to release the hook. So no matter how hot you set it, it may still feel like there's movement needed. If at rest, the head sits at a steeper angle in relation to the finger beds, the colder or slower the hinge is going to feel, and in order to be able to use it effectively, it will be necessary to draw the bow with even finger pressure across your fingers, and a lot less thumb as well. That way you will have less slack to take up to get where the head starts to lift up off the neck. If you go the other direction and the head sits at a shallower or even a negative angle in relation to the finger beds, the hotter or faster it is capable of being set, and you can use a more aggressive grip angle to draw the bow and still be able to execute your shot. This is because the head is either already off the neck when you draw and it is free to accept any input you provide, or you have a lot less slack to take up to get it to start lifting or moving. The two polar opposites in this regard, that are currently in production anyway, are the UltraView Hinge 2.0 and the TrueBall Executive Flex. The former is very cold, and the latter is hotter than hell. The hotter releases are capable of accommodating a less aggressive grip by adjusting their moons or sears, but a cold release like the Hinge 2.0 usually cannot be set hot enough to accommodate an aggressive grip angle. It's not impossible, but it requires adjustments to the archer's form, and I place a higher value on releases where I don't need to make changes to my own shot process in order to use them. The Executive Flex's head rests at a downward angle to the finger beds, so it is designed to be drawn with the head already floating and not pinned to the top of the neck. So this one is much easier to manipulate at different angles. So if you draw with a lot of index finger and you use the thumb peg as a pulling post, as I do, you're going to want to hinge with a head angle that sits at a shallower angle in relation to the handle. That way it'll still be able to move if your handle is still facing forward. The Stan LynX sits somewhere in the middle. It's not as aggressive as the Executive Flex, but it's easy enough to manipulate if you draw with an aggressive hand angle. It's probably not going to take the place of the Executive Flex as my current favorite, but it has enough adjustment range to be able to work with my goofy draw style where the ring finger is still angled forward and my elbow is not aligned with the arrow at full draw when I start to actually execute my shot process. Stan displays on their box and on their website, Made in America, so there is no need to wonder whether the parts were manufactured somewhere else and assembled here. I can't say the same thing about another company whose products I just reviewed. I know you're watching, I'm still waiting on your answer. The stainless steel bolts on the LynX look to be of good quality. There are no head stamps on the screws, so I don't know what company manufactured them. I wouldn't mind replacing all the button head screws on the LynX with socket heads because I have managed to deform a few of those on my Onyxes trying to secure the finger attachment to keep it from shifting. The flange on them is pretty thick, so getting that to flex means torquing the screw pretty pretty hard, and a button head screw that takes a 9/64 inch Allen key can only endure so much. The same size of screw also attaches the thumb peg to the thumb peg assembly. They also insist on joining the halves of their handles with these tiny-ass Phillips head screws. They look like you'd use an eyeglass screwdriver on them, and I'm pretty sure they do that because either they don't want us taking it apart or because there are no socket Allen screws that are made that are that small. Remember earlier when I mentioned that if a company is going to farm out the marketing of a product to a third party, they should probably make sure that third party is putting out accurate information about the product? Well, we're now going to talk about that. PJ Riley from Lancaster Archery can spin a really good yarn. I haven't met the man yet. He seems like a nice guy, but some of the things he throws out in his product videos can make my eye twitch. I think he must have sold used cars in a previous life. I don't know what he was smoking when he described the hook retention on the LynX. He made the claim in the product video that while the hook does not have a spring or magnet holding in place, there is stiffness built intentionally into the system that keeps the hook from moving freely and keeping it seated into the fire position. Side note, in my videos I call it the ready position because as archers we don't fire things, we loose them. Anyway, I digress. So once the hook is reset, it is not supposed to fall out of position. He also made a claim that according to Pete Crawford, who owns Stanislawski Archery, the use of hook retention systems or auto-returns, as they call them, such as springs, magnets, and rubber bands, may introduce inconsistencies in the position in which the hook interfaces with the Sierra Moon, thereby changing the starting position where you begin your shot process. Basically, auto-return systems may not seat the hook in the exact same position every time. They add cost to the release, and that's why they didn't install one on the Onyx. Okay, there were a number of R words that came to mind when I heard that explanation, but I settled on ridiculous for purposes of this video. There is a principle known as Hitchens' razor that states that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence, and it applies to a lot of claims made of products to drive sales. If you are satisfied with leaving it at that, please feel free to skip ahead to this timecode. In the next section, I'm going to spend a nice chunk of timecode explaining why I think it's ridiculous, and then I'm going to continue to nitpick it into oblivion. This assertion that auto-return systems on hinges can affect the speed of your hinge is a heaping load of nonsense. The purpose of hook retention or auto-returns is to hold the hook in place and keep it in position against the stopper in the head so it can't fall back out of place before you hook it up to the D-loop. So with some hinges, you don't even have to touch the hook at all because the hook resets on the rebound after you loose your arrow, and others require that the hook be reset manually, and then it stays in place ready for the next arrow. I don't see where there is any room for inconsistency there, especially its relationship to the interface between the hook and the moon. The two things actually have very little to do with each other. Rubber bands can weaken over time, and the hook can sit more loosely against the stopper in the head, usually a metal pin or an area of the head itself. So it's metal on metal contact where one piece pivots on a tight-fitting pin. But the hook doesn't even come into contact with the moon until you attach the hook to the D-loop and pull the hook and the moon together. The spot where they touch is determined by the range of the motion of the head, the setting of the moon, and the angle of the head in relation to the handle. Most of the time when I hook up a hinge to a D-loop, it's with the head pinned to the top of the neck, and then when I pull it tight to draw the bow, the interface of the hook and the moon is determined by the angle of my hand. I still can't see how a spring, magnet, or rubber band could even influence anything that happens after the hook is on the D-loop. The answer I keep coming up with is, it can't. The only factor that can influence the starting point and consistency of length of travel is user input. Consistent hand position on the draw ensures the hook contacts the Sierra Moon in the same place, and hook retention has nothing to do with it. If I'm missing something here, please let me know in the comments. I spent literal days trying to think about this, and it's part of the reason why it took me so long to get this video out. There might be a discussion to be had regarding whether an auto-reset system can influence how cleanly a hook separates from a D-loop on release, but that's a whole different rabbit hole of over-exacting analysis that's deeper than I even want to go, and it's also not what they were talking about. Briefly back to the subject of hook retention. If they actually do have this opinion about auto-return systems on hinges, then another important question comes to mind. If auto returns introduce inconsistencies into the system, then why did they put a hook return spring on the LynX Hinge? It's almost as though they contrived a reason out of thin air to justify why they didn't install a spring or magnet on the LynX, and threw it out there regardless of whether it made a lick of sense. So why did I just spend all that time breaking down the explanation and justification for this feature? Well, because it's not actually a feature, and they're not accurately representing how this release actually behaves. I have two LynXes, a brass and aluminum enlarged, and neither of them actually hold their hooks securely, and there is nothing on Stan's website, technical manual, or their own promotional materials that actually says it is supposed to do what PJ claimed it does in the video. The hooks on both of these move freely in the head, they have no stiffness to them, and while they resist falling out of the ready position if you let the head dangle, a little shake can cause them to fall out of position. That doesn't fit the definition of hook retention in my book, and that's certainly not what was represented in the Lancaster Archery video. There is no stiffness in this system. There is information on the clutch system in the technical guide, but as far as anything keeping the hook from moving around, there is nothing in the literature. What I should be able to do if there was stiffness in the system is I should be able to reset the hook and shake it like it owes me money and not have to touch it again when I go to hook up to the D-loop. This is the TrueBall Executive Flex, which uses a magnet for hook retention, and once I reset it, I can shake this thing till the cows come home, and the hook will not dislodge. The Executive Flex does cost $75 more, however, there are 12 other releases on this wall from 5 other brands in the $200 to $220 price range that all have some kind of hook retention. So because of that disparity, I reached out to Stan and asked him if the LynX I received are functioning the way they are intended. My message stated that I received 2 LynXes, the hooks move freely and do not remain in the fire position despite the Lancaster Archery video stating the hooks should have some stiffness in their movements as an alternative to a hook retention system like a spring or magnet. I asked if they were functioning as intended or if there was something missing on them. I sent that message on Friday, December 29th, 2023, and I received a response on Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024. The response verbatim was, "Hi Andrew, your release is not missing anything and sounds like it is working perfectly. We hope you enjoy." Okie dokie, that's not the response I was expecting. So the LynX has about as much hook retention as the series it is seemingly intended to replace. By nature of the shape of the hook head and sear, the Morex will hold its hook in place until you shake it. The LynX acts the same way. I think the best way to work around that, if you still like the features and the feel of the LynX, is to wait to reset the hook until you have your next arrow knocked and are just about to get hooked onto the D-loop. That way you wouldn't have to reset it twice if it falls out of position while you're waiting to get set up for your next arrow. Alright, I think I've beaten this point quite thoroughly into the ground. Now for some more fit and finish. It's actually not all bad. The quality of the parts and machining is high and what we would expect from Stan Archery, and many of the parts are machined out of stainless steel instead of aluminum or aluminium for my overseas audience, as seen on other brands. The hook is stainless steel, the head is stainless steel, the thumb barrel posts are stainless, and the thumb barrels are stainless. Stan also left them bare and uncoated, so the finish looks more consistent than the barrels on the posts for the Onyx, and they also bear a resemblance to the look of the Morex. The thumb pegs and posts on the Morex were actually aluminum. They did work, but they never felt very solid, and they were only held in place with a single set screw. They were also not nearly as adjustable. It would not be inappropriate of me to describe the LynX as a beefed up Morex. I'm fairly certain that's what they were going for. Both pieces of the handles on both models marry up very closely. You can feel the seam in the finger beds if you search for it, but not while you are actually using it. There are detectable machining marks on most of the surfaces of the brass LynX. They are subtle, but they're there if you look for them. The aluminum LynX has consistent anodizing and no visible tooling marks. The edges around some drilled holes and recessed areas are sharp, but they are sufficiently deburred and they don't catch your skin if you run your fingers over them. In terms of competition, the $200 to $220 hinge market is much more crowded than I originally thought until I started listing them. There are other options in the price bracket including the B3 Tangent, Infinity Pro, BT Pro Coupe, and Ghost, the TrueFire Sear X, the TrueBall HT Hybrid Flex, the Scott Archery Ascent and Select, and the Carter NV 2 Moons and Total Control. I also looked it up online and forgot to mention that you can also get the UltraView Hinge 2.0 from from anywhere from $189 all the way up to $250 depending on where you look, so technically it fits in the same price bracket. Each one is similarly priced, and their feature sets include micro-adjustable sears and moons. Most of them have hook retention, and other ones have different sizes and adjustable finger attachments. So it comes down to which one fits your hand the best, and whether you can set it up for your draw style. In conclusion, overall, I think Stan did a good job putting the LynX together. I'm not ready to call it a worthy successor to the Morex, though. It's missing some specific features that I would expect to be on a hinge made in 2023, those being micro-adjustable moons and auto-return hooks, and I don't believe the latter should have been excluded to cut costs. That being said, there is no other hinge on the market in this price bracket that is available in 4 different sizes. You can get away with a little wiggle room with a thumb release, but a well-fitted hinge is essential for a consistent grip and shot process. It also has a thumb peg system with a greater range of adjustment than anything else on the market. So if you can put up with the floppy hook and having to poke the moon with an Allen key to make adjustments in exchange for a handle that feels like it was custom fit for your hand, then the LynX might actually be the right option for you. If you can't, then there are plenty of other options to go for. I'm going to close out with a prediction. I think the LynX is potentially an incremental step for the new owners at Stan to do the things they wanted to do with the Onyx series but couldn't because they were compromised by the need to match the new platform with an old design, that being the Perfex. Now they have a new platform that doesn't have to match itself to anything other than what comes after it. So I'm going to predict that next year they're going to re-release this handle with an independently adjustable click and speed moon system and auto return spring under the hook, and it's going to be called the LynX Pro. If they actually do that, I'm going to have mixed feelings about it because a few videos ago I criticized Trueball for releasing an incomplete product in the Executive Hinge, only to release the Executive Flex a year later with everything that should have been on it from the start. I will make sure to call out Stan for doing something similar with the LynX if they do actually do that. I am also going to make a prediction that a thumb release is going to come out eventually to match the LynX, because releasing a matching thumb and hinge is all the rage these days, and hinge ergonomics on a thumb release work better than thumb release ergonomics do on a hinge. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments. Until next time, take care, stay safe, and happy hunting. That way, it'll still be able to manipulate if the tip or... Oops. Stan calls that piece the thumb peg. That was my thumb cracking. Stan calls that piece the thumb peg slugs with no dot. That's all, folks.